Star Wars Legion has had a massive overhaul in rules. Let's get into exactly what they are. What does this mean for you guys? Am I excited about the changes? Is this enough to bring me back into the game? I don't know, let's find out. Okay, the first massive change we're going to talk about is turn 0. This is completely different now. Your deployments, your battle decks, objectives, all this is completely changed. First of all, both players are going to have to bring in their own battle decks. And the cards of these have completely changed. You can actually print and play them now. So they're available online, you can grab them. You have 3 objective cards that are going to be in your deck. These are primary objectives, and there are secondary objectives and advantage cards. We determine who is blue player now by rolling dice. So you're going to grab 5 black dice, you're going to roll them the same time as the other person. Whoever comes up with the most surges, they're going to be blue player. In the event of a tie, you're checking the hits, and if you tie again, you're checking surges. Now the blue player is going to be able to determine whether they want to use their primary objective card or secondary objective card to start the setup of the board. Now, the red player will choose the opposite card, whatever the blue player doesn't pick. So if the primary card is chosen by blue player, then the red player will choose a secondary card. And then both players will also get an advantage card, which gives them extra advantages in that particular game. The veto process has changed as well. So what is actually going on is that you can choose to veto the primary mission by replacing it from one from your deck, or you could do it for the secondary mission, or if you're not happy with the advantage that you have, you can also replace that. You're gonna have an opportunity to do this twice. So let's talk about these cards. The primary objective cards, they've got the primary source of your victory points, but also the state of deployment, where your friendly areas are and where you can actually deploy onto the board. Your secondary objective card, which might be obvious already, are additional ways to earn victory points. Once all the vetoes are done and the board is all set up and all that, you're going to deploy, but you're only going to deploy units with prepared positions. They're going onto the board first, and everything else doesn't even hit the board yet. They actually deploy during the first round of the game. As you pull out their unit chip, you're going to be putting your movement tool on the very edge of the board in your deployment zone and performing a move. So that's their first action done. The first action is always going to be moving onto the board, unless you have a scouting action, which is a little sneaky. You actually get a free movement onto the board, so you can get a little closer. So scouting, watch it, it's going to be very, very powerful. Now, let's get into army building. When you build your army, 1,000 points is the cutoff now instead of 800. And you want to get yourself as close to 1,000 now, because there's no reason to take a bid. Blue player is random. So squeeze in as many points as you can to that 1,000. The game also goes for fewer rounds, 5 rounds instead of 6. And you've also got that first round where you're deploying onto the board. So you've got very short amount of time to do what you need to be done, like four rounds really, like 4.5 rounds, because you're deploying for half of that first round. And that's going to be really tight. You're going to have to make every action count. And the game can also end prematurely. If anyone gets 12 victory points and they're not tied, then that game will end that round. So that's very interesting as well. Now, earlier on, there was a new addition to the game, the passing mechanic. If your opponent had more activations than you, then you would get a pass token that you could use to skip an activation and sort of counterbalance the difference in activations. This is changed as well. Instead, you count the activations that each player has, and then you're going to be taking the difference, -1, and that's how many passes you have now. So for example, if I have 7 activations and you have 10, Well, the difference is 3, take away 1, then I've got 2 pass tokens that I can use. I can pass twice. That's pretty massive. The next big change to Star Wars Legion is cover. And the first thing you're going to need is a half range ruler template. So it's like half of range 1, right? And you're gonna need this to determine cover. So you still, in the same way, check from the shooting to the defender, whether or not any minis are obscured, but they only gain cover if the minis are within half a range of that cover. So this is gonna take away a lot of those really sort of yucky situations where there's just things popping out from ages away and, oh, I've got cover now, but you have to be actually very close to the terrain to gain that cover now. And what the cover does is very different as well. If you are granted cover, and let's say it's light cover, instead of just knocking off a hit to your attack when you're defending, instead, for every hit that's coming your way, you pick up a white defense dice. And this is before you're doing your saves. You pick up your white defense dice for every hit that's coming your way. Very important, crits don't count for this. You roll all those dice, and if it's light cover, any shield that comes up, that's a canceled hit right there and then. And that's huge. If you have heavy cover, then surges also block hits. This is massive because before, those small attack pools couldn't really get through that cover. Whereas now they've got a much better shot. And with those big attack pools, there's a there's a much higher chance of blocking a lot more hits. So that's, yeah, big change to the game right there. Next, I want to talk about backup. Backup is this very interesting new mechanics that's been added into Star Wars Legion. If you have a commander within half a range, I think that's what they're calling it, half a range of a unit leader that has the ability to grant backup, then you can cancel 2 hits, right, from an oncoming attack. Now, there's a few things you need to be aware of when it comes to backup. Backup is primarily just for core units, right? There are exceptions, which I'll get into as well. But your core units who are not suppressed and within half a range of the commander can prevent 2 hits, just like that. Really, really powerful. But there are some keywords that change this as well. If you have a character with Guardian, or if you have a character with Entourage, then they can also provide that backup ability as well. So this change in particular is really massive because the game of Legion can really swing when you lose one of these major characters. So like having just some dudes around them blocking those extra hits, that could be massive. That could be a really big deal. And like I can see this being really good for characters like Palpatine and your big point characters that you always didn't want to bring because they just melted down too quickly. This is a really nice change. I really like this one. Next up, there's been a change to withdraw. Withdraw is changed completely. So instead of using your entire activation to withdraw, it's just one action. So you can still perform your speed 1 move. It does have to be a speed 1 move and you can move out of combat. The difference here now is that you cannot perform an attack or a standby. So this is in essence a big nerf to engagements and stuff like that, because quite often when it came down to the nitty gritty and you really wanted to secure an objective, you would dive in and you would, grapple a bunch of guys and prevent them from getting onto an objective. But now you can withdraw and still capture an objective or get into position to still score for something. So less powerful now engaging in those hand-to-hand fights. Next new change is that notched bases now can perform essentially a free pivot before they move. So some of them already could do this. Now they all can. Now this change in particular, massive. I can't tell you how many times one of my stat bikes has gotten into really awkward position. I had to give up one of my activations just to get it repositioned so I could actually do something with it. Getting a free pivot every time, man, this is incredible. So good. Since we're on the topic of notch bases, let's talk about vehicles. There's been some big changes there too. So for instance, vehicles no longer granted cover by terrain. They still have the cover keyword on their card, but otherwise, cover not granted by terrain. And their armor value is no longer flat. There's like an armor X for, as far as I'm aware, every single vehicle now. So if you have a mass amount of hits coming in through, then you might be able to get over this armor value and actually do some damage. I can remember a lot of really frustrating games when you were fighting against a vehicle, you didn't have any impact, and you rolled like a ton of dice and saw like hits as far as the eye could see, and none of them got through. So I think this is actually a pretty good change. Flat armor was a pretty hard feeling, you didn't like it. This I think is actually fair. Also, when a vehicle becomes damaged, when it meets that threshold, no longer are you picking up a red die and rolling it, you are just getting the damaged vehicle token. And this just means you pick up a white die, roll it, you get some paint, you get both your actions. You don't, you're just getting one action. So very simple change there. I think that's probably for the better. The weapon malfunction can really hurt sometimes. And the other one with the movement, that was a feel bad. If you couldn't get yourself anywhere, you're taking up 2 actions just to move, that was painful. So yeah, I think that's a good change. Now, I'm a CIS player and I can't tell you how excited I am about this next change. AI is completely different now. So instead of needing just an order token to prevent that AI action from happening, you can be within range 3 of your commander. This is a massive change to the droid army faction. I had to just build my army around those B1s because I wanted to make sure everything had an order, and I think that's still good. It's still a good thing to do, to daisy chain those things and have that order control. But now I have a lot of freedom and flexibility in my army building. I don't feel constricted to have to worry about AI all the time. This is a huge change. And oh, my sniper boys, they're really, really scary now. I'll tell you that. And the change also to override has been changed since, that range 1 to 2, that wasn't important anymore. Instead, that range has been increased to range 5. So really powerful override. You can essentially be doing whatever you want all over the board if you have override. So really, really powerful. Next up, there's been a massive buff to a lot of abilities like aid, compel, take cover. All those types of abilities have had their range extended to range 2. This is awesome. This is a really strong change. And if it allows your commander to actually stay back a little bit more and keep them safe and still feel like they've got that impact on the board. And that's a really good change, I think, as well. Next, attachments don't actually count to your threshold for particular army building rules. So for instance, in my CIS example, I could be bringing Maul with a bunch of snipers, 3 snipers, in addition to his probe droids as well. So that's a pretty cool change too. Fire support has been completely changed. Now when you get an order token, you gain a standby. Wow, that's really good. Is it better than fire support? I don't know. Probably is. Yeah, I think it's better for sure. Yeah, it's better. Getting it because you can actually get 2 attacks rather than having to combine your attack with someone else. So yeah, this is really strong. Very strong. Next up, the reinforcement change is because we're no longer deploying on the board, instead, you're getting a free speed 1 move at the end of round 1. How do I feel about this? I don't know. There was a big advantage to being able to deploy last and seeing what your opponent was going to do. I know that the super tactical droids, they have that option of divulging the card to get reinforcements. I don't know if it's worthwhile divulging that card now to get that free movement. I don't know. I think the free refresh is much better. So yeah, I don't know. It could be still meaningful. We'll have to wait and see. Next up, we've got to change to Tempted. So Tempted no longer allows Anakin to take dark side force powers, but instead, once per round, if a friendly unit will die within range 3 of him, he gets a free movement or a free attack. Ha! That's massive, that's huge. That's really powerful. And as far as I'm aware, Anakin is the only one with this keyword. We'll wait and see what happens, but yeah, that's a really powerful ability. I wonder if it will stay that way. Maybe it will change, I don't know, but this is really powerful. And the last thing I want to talk about is something that I couldn't find. I scoured the rule book for it, but I heard rumors about doubling up your core units. So paying double to effectively increase the size of your core units. And I could not find this for the life of me anywhere in that rule book. So perhaps it was something that was discussed on stream, I'm not sure, but that's something to look out for, because I've heard from a pretty reliable source that that is something that will be coming to the game. And that's pretty cool. I'm imagining my B1 core units with just massive amounts of bodies in them. So that's going to be really cool. Really hard to kill them. And apart from all the changes I've discussed, and I couldn't get into everything, these are just the ones that I thought were really important and worth mentioning. There is also massive changes and erratas to the unit cards, which I'll leave you to discover on your own. So what do I think about these changes? They're pretty exciting. The game of Star Wars Legion for me had become quite stale. There hadn't been a lot of change in a long time. I actually stopped playing. I can't remember when the last time I played. It would have been maybe late last year, the last game I actually played. So it's been a long time since playing and I feel reinvigorated. I can't wait to jump into these new rules and play a game. So I'm very excited. I can't wait to play. And perhaps I'll even show a gameplay on the channel. So if that's something you're interested in, comment down below, let me know, and that may happen. All right, well, thanks guys, and have a good one.